Oh, my screen's gone bonkers again. Okay, hello. It always feels so weird on Zoom. It's really odd, but it's lovely to see your names and to see some faces. It's always really good to see faces when you do Zoom things, because otherwise you're in this strange vacuum talking to yourself. So thank you for those of you that have put your cameras on. I'm Selina. I'm the course leader for the MA in Applied Theatre at Central, and I'm going to talk at you, which is very unapplied theatre-ish, but I'm going to talk at you for a little while about the course. And then, as Sophie says, if you've got questions, put them in the chat and we will answer them. But also, if there's not going to be very many more of us than this, I'm really happy for you to unmute yourselves and ask questions by waving at me, by using the your actual hands or the virtual hands in the reactions thing at the bottom. Any of that is fine. If we hit lots and lots of people, I won't be able to do all of that at once. So I'll let you be the judge of that. But it's always best if this can be a little bit of a conversation, because otherwise it's really dull. So don't hesitate to ask questions. The Applied Theatre course at Central. Oh, I've done this so many times and I always never know where to start. So today I'm going to start by saying the Applied Theatre course at Central really interrogates, investigates and plays with the idea of working with theatre and performance of all types with community groups in whichever setting is appropriate to the people who want to work on the course. So sometimes those community groups might be schools, they might be hospitals, they might be prisons, they might be actual community groups in a village, they might be outreach and education departments, but it covers all angles of working in a performative way with people outside of mainstream theatres. And for me, the course is underpinned by one sort of key philosophy that really has a direct effect on how the whole course runs. I really firmly believe that if you're going to be working with people, there's no point in just having a theoretical examination of that, because the theory of what you do with people is brilliant and it's really useful and it gives you the ethics and it gives you a guideline of what to do. But the practice of working with people sometimes means you're in situations where the theory makes no sense, or where you're doing something that feels really ethical but goes against what the theory might say. The reality of what you should do with a group of 14-year-old boys who are in a drama class and the reality of what you might end up doing with them are two very different things. So it's really important to me that we don't just talk about theatre and applying it academically and theoretically. It's really important to me that we're actually doing that as a group and as individuals as we go through the whole course. So that has a really direct effect on the timetable. It means that students on this course are only ever in the building, whether they're part-time or full-time. They're only ever in the building in classes 1 or 2 days a week, absolutely maximum. Because the rest of the week, it's really important that people are out doing real applied theatre work or drama education work with real groups of people. So to make that happen, or to enable that to happen, we work with about 250 placement organisations within the London area. And students will all involve themselves in some type of placement activity throughout all 3 terms of the course, from quite early on, from about week 4 or 5 of the first term. And the 250 organisations that we work with will tell us what they've got on offer, and that varies really differently from year to year, and where they think they have stuff that it might be useful for a placement student to be involved in. And then I meet each student on a one-to-one basis to work out what it is that you want on an individual basis from the course. So together we plot a journey through your placement experience or experiences across the year that builds you up to being the place where you want to be when you leave us. So examples of placement organisations might be as kind of some of the places I mentioned earlier: hospitals, prisons, galleries, schools, libraries. Did I say museums? Big theatre companies like the National and the Globe and their outreach and education department, smaller scale theatre companies like the Young Vic or Theatre 503. They all have outreach and education departments. They all take our students on placements. But also there are some really bespoke and specialist theatre companies in London that work with really specific community groups. So Clean Break, for example, who work with women who have experience of the criminal justice system. Cardboard Citizens, who work with people who have an experience of being homeless. Outside Edge, who work with people who have a lived experience of addiction. And the list goes on and on and on. So how much or how little placement activity you take is up to you. Some people will come in with loads of practical experience from their own context or their day jobs or their other half of their life if they think they're being part-time, if they're coming as a part-time student. So they might take less placement experience because they've already got that in their lives. Other people who come in with less of that might do more placement experience. So two really extreme examples of that is we once had a student from Chile who did 51 different placements while he was with us in his year. Don't do that, that's crazy. 51 is too many. But he got a really huge variety of experiences, from storytelling with primary school children to making theatre, a Christmas show for elders in a care home. He worked in a conflict resolution program in Cyprus, bringing Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots together to create theatre. He worked for a large theatre company called Oily Cart, who made bespoke performances for young people with severe and multiple disabilities. He worked in a prison for 2 weeks, making children's theatre with fathers, and on and on and on. That's a little bit too much. But his main aim on the course was to get as much varied experience of applied theatre as possible, so he could take it back to his home city, Santiago in Chile, and set up his own theatre company and be as versatile to what the needs of the communities in Santiago might be when he had no access to that work that might have been happening in Chile at that time. He said there was no work happening in Chile, but he was wrong. There was work happening in Chile. He just didn't know what it was and where it was. So he did the course, and then he went back and he set up his own theatre company. Ironically, he now works with one very specific demographic after all of that. He works with primary school children on anti-bullying programs in 42 primary schools around the Santiago area, which is funded by the Chilean government. So, and he now employs 8 people to do that work with him, and placement students from Central, which is really great. But the other extreme example of that is we had a student 2-3 years ago who thought he wanted to get some experience of being a drama teacher in a UK school. He spent 1 day a week for the first term in that school, fell in love with it, and in the second term spent 4 days a week in the same school, and then in the third term did a full-time placement there and did nothing else for his whole week apart from work in that school. And then at the end of the year they gave him a job, and so he stayed on that placement, which is now his job, for 5 years. That's also not right. Somewhere in between those two extreme examples is the way to think about placements. They're definitely a way to put you into contact with networking people and community work and give you practical experience of things that you might not have done before, or things you want to do in a different way or gain a deeper level of working with. So that's the first key thing about the course. You are never in the building more than 2 days a week, and often only one, in the first 2 terms. So in the first 2 terms, everybody does the same thing in the building with us. There will be a session on working in prisons. There will be a session on storytelling with 5-year-olds. There will be a session on how queer theory might affect our work, or trans theory, or queer theory, gender theory, and critical race theory might affect our work. There will be practical sessions on working with physical theatre for people who have disabilities, and again the list goes on. So the things that happen in the building are not very bespoke. Everybody more or less does the same thing as each other at the same time. Where the course becomes really bespoke and it becomes catered to your individual needs is through the placements. So that's the first 2 terms work on that model. And then in the third term, it's possible to not come into Central at all, but spend your whole term working on a placement or a project, or 2 placements and projects, and use those for all of your assessment work. Sounds a little bit crazy. Come to Central, do an MA, don't come into the building. That's crazy. Clearly, we don't just push you out there. You still have tutorials, you still meet with us on a regular basis, but your main assessment work could be happening outside of the building. That's really exciting, because that means that doesn't reduce you just to working in London. So you could work anywhere in the UK. You could use work that you've already got that exists in your life for that unit, or you could apply for our Leverhulme funding and take the work to somewhere else in the world. So we regularly in term 3 have students working in the prison system in Detroit in the US. We have students working in this amazing theatre company in New York, which brings together NYP, New York Department police officers and community members to do a conflict resolution program, which is amazing because the police officers have all been identified as having racist tendencies, if not more than that, and the community members all identify as having unpleasant experiences with police in the past. So bringing those two groups of people together is quite amazing. So you could be there for the term, you could be working on one of our projects that happens in India or South Africa, or a project that you've designed that happens somewhere in the world where you want it to happen. So the key thing about term 3 is you do the work that's most useful for you to fill the final gaps to get you where you want to be when you leave us. So if that means going back to your home city, wherever that might be, and working on a project there to start bedding in your career in that place, then that's the right thing to do. If the right thing to do is to stay in London and suck as much out of the applied theatre world in London, and the applied theatre world in London is quite spectacular, then that's the best place for you to be. If the best place for you to be is, well, let's get a specific example. We had a student a couple of years ago from Chicago in the US, and she specifically wanted to work with schools that specialize in working with young people who have autism. And so she spent 2 weeks working in a drama room for autistic children in London. Then she spent 2 weeks doing the same thing in South Africa, and then she merged those two sets of practice because they were quite distinctly different, and took them to her home city in Chicago and implemented her own program that merged all the things she'd learned in London and in South Africa, and implemented a program in Chicago that did the same thing but in her style. So that was the most useful thing for her, gathering knowledge from different places and then developing her own practice for her own hometown. So the Leverhulme money exists to allow people to get to the place where the project happens and to pay for your accommodation once you get there. So that counts anywhere outside of London. So we regularly have students doing placements in Devon and Cornwall, in Wales, in Scotland, in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and the rest of the world. You don't have to do any of that in term 3. You could opt to do the same thing as you do in the first 2 terms and come into the building 1 day a week and do classes with us, and then do your placements in the same way as you do in the first 2 terms. So that it's really flexible. And then the 4th term, which officially doesn't count, we don't have 4 terms, the university tells me. They tell me we have 3, but I know that's not true, because I know in what I call the 4th term, students are writing their dissertation. That sounds like a term to me. So you do 2 terms split between placements and being at Central, 1 term where you can continue that, or you can be really radical and go somewhere else and do something different, or throw yourself into a company in London, or 2 companies in London, and then you do a term of dissertation writing. And that's the MA in a nutshell. Done, finished, there you go, you've done it already. No, it's clearly not true. Other key things to know about the course: it's big. It is big. This year we have 62 students. I love that. It is amazing to bring together 62 people from around the world who are all making community work in different ways, or drama education in different ways in different places. So this year we have 8 students from China, 2 from Russia, 3 from India, 1 from Sri Lanka, 1 from Saudi Arabia, 1 from Greece, 2 from the US, 1 from Canada, 1 from Italy, 1 from France. I'm running out. I've forgotten people, which feels really cruel, but that mix is really dynamic. So it allows students to create cross-continent projects between themselves, which is really exciting. It allows students to find out what's happening in all of those places applied theatre-wise, and for people to share and develop new practice that isn't about exporting a set of practices from one place to another, but it's very much about forging work for the communities that it's made for, using the techniques that are right for those people, which is really great. Having such a big cohort also allows me to be really diverse about not only place and geographical regions people come from, but age and experience. So the extremes, they're always easy to talk about. Our eldest student was 84. So she was 84 years old. She'd been doing community theatre in a very rural part of the UK for 40 years of her life, and then suddenly woke up one morning and said, I want to do an MA because I want to know that the theory backs up what I've been doing for all of these years. which of course it did. But the amazing opportunity to have somebody who'd been doing that in the room for 40 years with somebody who's come straight out of university, who has cutting edge performance knowledge and theoretical knowledge from the last 5-6 years, and combining that with somebody who's got 40 years of practice is really exciting. So we regularly have students who come straight out of university, never that many of them, maybe 4, 5, 6 of them maximum, and then people right across the range who've been doing this kind of work in different settings for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years or more. We also have a number of places on the course of people who have an interest in theatre and performance, but have got a completely different professional set of experiences. So we once had a maths teacher who wanted to come onto the course to know how he could use drama and theatre to make his maths classes more interesting. We once had a hospital administrator who was in charge of which nurse was in which bit of the hospital and what the corridors looked like and where the patients' beds were, that side of administration. And he just said, he came in for interview and he said, I've always loved theatre in my life. I think hospitals would be better places if there was more art in them. I want to come and do this course to see how I can combine those two things. So we regularly have a couple of people who haven't got a particularly drama or applied drama background, but who have a passion and a commitment to working with theatre or performance art and people in unusual settings. I'm going to pause. I've talked very fast and covered a lot of stuff. Has anybody got any questions yet while I take a sip of water? Deanna, hit me with your question.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Mm.
Oh, okay. So I'm coming from Montreal, Canada. And last year I didn't end up doing my final application. So I have a question. You might have covered it before I was able to hook up here. Mm-hmm. So I have epilepsy, which is recognized here in the province of Quebec as a disability.
Yeah.
It's under control now with medication. So would that apply to Central's definition of a disability?
Yeah, you would absolutely get support for that.
So I should mark down, hopefully it works out for 2022 as I have a disability.
Yes, that alerts our support systems to know that they should meet up with you early on and find out what additional support you might need or how we can react in case you have an episode while you're with us, so that we can put protection in to make sure that you're as safe as you can be in our environment and that you're still getting the most out of the course as you possibly can. So yeah, I definitely mark that down, and then we would at the beginning of the course we would find you a mentor and support worker to help you through the course if you need it. You obviously don't have to access that, but so it's there if you need it.
Okay, and being older, I just wanted to know the difference between, and again, I might have missed it, if part-time versus full-time. I know there's a 2-year span, 2 years for part-time.
If you're an international student, it's against the UK visa regulation of rules and regulations to be a part-time student.
Oh,
so
I
as an
didn't know that.
International student, unfortunately, our government takes that choice away from you.
Ah, okay. So that simplifies me planning.
Makes it a simpler choice for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's actually, in case other people have a similar question from a different perspective, there's no difference between the part-time and the full-time, apart from full-timers always take 2 units each term until we get to the dissertation. So they do 7 units in their full year. Part-time students do exactly the same number of units, but they only do 1 unit per term over 2 years, and they still end with the dissertation. So they get all the same opportunities and experiences, just at a slower rate.
I just want to finish up with, because 1 year would be quite intense. I mean, I might be jumping ahead here. So is there something in place for students that might be feeling overwhelmed, being older, being
Yes.
I keep going back to older, I'm tired today.
Yeah, we have really good support systems at Central that allow you to have access to counsellors, to mentors, to a student support service that does drop-in centres. We have special drop-ins and sessions for older students, mature students is the way I should be phrasing that, for mature students Yeah, we're because we're so small, we're a very small organization. 1,000 people doesn't always feel small, but Central only has 1,000 students, which sometimes feels like loads, but actually it's quite small, which allows us to all really know each other quite well, to the extent where the library staff will know who you are and what course you're on. So if you are late with a library book, you'll be walking through the foyer and our librarian will go, Kat, you owe us a book, bring it in immediately, you're late. Or might go, Kat, you're really interested in researching prison theatre and there's this new book that's come in that might be good for you. So right from the library staff to the reception staff to the support staff, we're a hard place to get lost in. Everybody will know who you are and what you're doing, which could be a disadvantage, but it creates a sort of close-knit relationship, which is very supportive for students of whatever age and level of experience.
Thank you.
I'm still pausing. Any more questions? Yes, go for it, Sarah.
Hello.
Hello.
I wanted to ask, so about the placements, what is the process of kind of like choosing which placements do we want? Is it on us, or is it like
it's a combination of things. So different hosts or host organizations will offer different placements depending what they've got available at different times. They will send me and my wonderful placements administrator / manager a list of what they've got. I spend time with each student doing a one-to-one session at least once a term, where I work out what you want and what you need. And I match the two together with the help of the placements manager, and then we will assign you to one. Sometimes that means that people will pick a specific company, and if they're offering, we'll slot you in. More often than not, it's more complex than that, because you might know of some companies that work specifically, I don't know, with women from the criminal justice system, but we will know that lots of other companies might also be doing that in different contexts and settings. So it's really useful to know the type of work that people are interested in rather than the specific companies, so we can search that out. And some people will do one type of placement all year. Some people will come in and go, I really know that I want to work with 14 to 18-year-olds in lots of different ways with lots of different companies. So they might spend their whole year doing that on placement. Others might come in and say, I only want to work in settings with people who are recent arrivals and refugees and migrants, and they will spend their whole year doing that in different contexts. Other people will come in and say, I want varied experiences. I might want to do a little bit of time in a prison. I might want to do a little bit of time with a refugee community. I might want to do a little bit of time in a school setting, and mix and merge them until they sort of the end of the second term, beginning of the third term, where they might narrow that down and define it a little bit more. So it's an ongoing negotiation and process of what hosts are offering and what you need and want at that point in the course.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As a kind of follow-up question, if we're, because there's so many options of what kind of work we can do you kind of recommend any reading or resources to kind of find out about the different kinds before we come in, so we have a better idea?
Once we've said yes and you've said yes, you then automatically get a pre-course reading list which starts to do some of that. But also once you're on the course, there's quite a lot of that happens. So there are 11 applied theatre faculty members at Central, which is quite lovely for me. It's nice to have so many people doing it around me. Many universities only have one or two, so we're a bit spoiled, which is great. And each of those 11 has their own specialization and works in all sorts of contexts, but we often have particular specializations. But also the times that you're in the building, you're not just working with the 11 of us, you're working with our placement hosts. So some of those same hosts that I've already mentioned will come in and deliver parts of our syllabus each year. So lots of people will start the program going, well, I think I want to work with 14-year-olds and I want to be in a youth theatre setting. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the course, they'll go, oh, I didn't know that thing even existed. And we've just had that session with Blink, and they did this amazing physical theatre work in a school with people who had access needs, and now I want to do that. So actually being on the course itself expands people's knowledge of what's available. It is impossible for everybody to do everything. Even the 51 placements doesn't do everything, but that's the other advantage of having such a large cohort. Because if you, Sarah, don't get a chance to work in a prison because it's not your priority, Bella might work in a prison in term 1, and then she can share her experiences with you and the rest of the group, so you get a sense of what that work was like without being able to do it. So that sharing of practice, whether it's practice you come in with or that you're developing while you're here, is also really important to the course. Also, applied theatre is constantly changing and evolving, which makes it doubly exciting. It's not bound and bounded as being a specific thing. So it changes its course each year. The types of work that are available change each year. And so it's impossible for us all to be on top of it all. And again, having so many people allows us to dip in and out of things, which is really exciting. For me, I'm biased. If it's not exciting to me, I don't want to be doing it. And I've now been doing this and course leading this course for 17 years, and it's still exciting. So that's me saying it's good. But what I would say about that is that sounds like I'm doing hard marketing spiel, and I'm not really. It's really important that you compare us with other places. There are lots of places in the world and lots of universities in the world that do applied theatre, and we all do it slightly differently. It's a very small world. We all know each other really, 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 really well. And we all know that we're not doing it in the same way. So it's really important that you talk to other people and you get interviewed by us and by other organisations that do it, whether it's in London or the UK or further afield, and make sure that you're going to the course that's giving you what you most want out of it. For some people, they won't want to do the practice at all. Some MA programs absolutely focus on the theory and not the practice. Some people go completely the other way and focus even more on the practice than we do. I really have this fundamental belief that you need the theory and the practice absolutely connected together, because you develop good practice out of good understanding of the theory and vice versa. So you need good theory to underpin the practice, and you need good practice to know whether that theory is relevant or not. So for me, the two are absolutely completely combined, but that's not the same for everybody and all courses. So, and they all have a different feel, and all the universities have a different feel. So if you want a really big university experience, there's nothing wrong with that. It's really important for some people. That's not us. We're a small campus, a small organisation. You won't be sat in a bar on the campus with somebody who does maths or engineering or science. We won't offer you rock climbing on a Wednesday afternoon because we're too small. But some people need and want that from their master's experience. So there's a combination of things you should be looking for. Go for it, Kat.
Hello.
Hello.
I had a question about the placements, and we're talking about this theory of like putting it into practice. Are the placements, would we be developing like our own curriculum through the coursework that we're
Sometimes.
Okay, cool.
Sometimes, yes. It depends how much experience you come in with and what you're doing as you go through the course. So some of our placements are, we're a care home and we want a project, we want a theatre production by Christmas. I'm using this as a specific example because this is a specific example that's happening at the moment. We have a care home that we work with from time to time, and they have emailed us to say their residents want to create a Christmas show for their relatives. Can we send them a director? So in that case, we'll actually send them 3 students. So we'll send them a student who's really experienced in directing, one who's got a little bit of applied work with people in care homes maybe, and somebody who has none of that but is bright and energetic and keen to learn about that environment. And the 3 of them together will create the curriculum and will devise that project and take complete ownership of that project. The opposite level of that, I guess, is we have people who've got very little experience who might want to spend some of their placement time shadowing, watching, observing somebody else practice while they begin to develop their skill levels. So again, we're not just matching communities and types of communities with what you want, we're absolutely matching what experience levels you've got with the placement house, so that we're constantly developing your skills at the rate that you're comfortable with. Don't want to throw anybody in at the deep end and go, you've never directed before, you've never facilitated, and you've never been in a hospital, but here you go and direct this. That would be hideous. But there'll be other people on the course who need and want exactly that. So it's a balance between what you want, what you've got and where you want to be, and what the placement hosts are offering. So that care home next term might come back to us and go, we've got a dance specialist who's coming in doing dance work with our residents. Have you got someone who can assist them facilitate that? Because they will run the sessions, but they need somebody who can pick up individual issues with individual participants. So that's a very different style of placement that could happen in exactly the same location. It just depends on what their needs are at that point. It has to be a balance, and you have to get something out of it, and it also has to be useful for the placement host. So if they're benefiting from it and you're benefiting from it, that is the perfect way that it should be.
Oh, thank you.
Any more questions? I've stunned you all into silence or boredom. I can't quite tell which. I am going to put my, now I've got a thing in the middle of the screen. I can't see your faces, but I am just going to put my email address in the chat so that you can, oh, now I'm talking and typing at the same time. That's quite tricky. If you've got questions or queries after today, just drop me an email. I'm not going anywhere. So if you don't want to ask it now, then don't. But if you've got them, email me. Or if you want to put stuff in the chat to ask now because you don't want to voice it, then you're also welcome to do that. The other thing I would say it's probably useful to say is what I'm looking for at interview. It's quite hard to describe in some ways. I'm not necessarily looking for experience levels because, as I said, we welcome a range of that. What I'm looking for are people who are committed to working with people. Now, that sounds ridiculous, but I'm definitely not looking for people who really want to be performers and be on stage. I'm looking for people who are interested in other people's stories and facilitating other people's art/theatre making. I'm looking for people who have a generosity of spirit and an open-mindedness. So everybody on the course will do a session on storytelling with 5-year-olds. So I need people to go, that might not be what I want to do, but I can take something from that session and adapt it and interpret it and use it in a different session. Same with prisons, same with hospitals, all of those things. So you have to be open to dipping your toe in the water in lots of different things. And I'm looking for people to not manage, but be part of that amazing eclectic mix. If you imagine having students or people in one room together from China, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Singapore, Australia, the UK, Wales, Ireland, that's etc., etc., etc. That's a really unusual space to navigate. It's a beautiful space, but it's not always an easy space for people to be in. So that's why the open-mindedness and a willingness to work with people is really important. Well, that and the work itself, obviously, because the work, you need to be interested in people. I'm pausing again in case people have got questions that just sprung into their minds. You don't have to have one, it's not a test. It's really okay not to have a question at this point. If you're like me, I get my question 5 minutes afterwards, which is why I've put my email in the chat. Go for it, Kat.
Quick question. When this upcoming year is full, will you post just on the general page for?
Yeah, I don't do that, but it does happen.
Okay.
Yeah. As a rough guideline for 2022, I can't even believe I'm saying that date. For the academic year that starts in October 2022, if you're thinking about applying for that year, my strong recommendation is get your application in before don't leave it past March. When we're full, we're full. I don't wait and interview everybody and then look back and pick the best 62, because that's impossible. I take the first brilliant 62, and now you're going to say, I don't feel brilliant. You are brilliant. You're all in this room. I take the first 62 that I think will work, and then we're closed. Quite often we're full by the time we hit Easter. Not always. Sometimes there's space, sometimes there isn't. Been an odd couple of years, COVID, lockdowns, all of that stuff has had a slight impact on our numbers. So last year we were a little lower than that and we would have had spaces. This year we were full quite early. People got optimistic about the end of COVID, but we're still functioning, we've still got placements, and we're still doing the majority of our work face to face, so they were right to be optimistic. Deanna, is that a question or a goodbye?
it's a question actually.
Go for it.
And because it didn't work out and my application didn't go far enough on that little road here that we're to upload stuff and everything, is there an email address that I could ask for someone to give me a call here in Montreal to clarify how I'm to upload what's it called? The person who is vouching for me, or
The reference, yeah.
the reference, yes, thank you.
I
Or
think
just-
the best address at the moment is the admissions address.
Admissions, okay.
Yeah, so it's admissions@cssd.ac.uk. So just like mine, but without my name, the word admissions, they're probably the best people to talk to about that.
Okay, because I stopped my free or small payment for long distance because when I didn't, because I had that in place.
Yeah, they will. Now we're back in the building. They do make phone calls. It was harder when they were working from their homes, but we do have everyone
Right.
is back in the building on some level. So absolutely, that should be possible. If you run into a problem with that, email me.
Okay.
I won't talk you through it, but I will nag you to do it. You don't want me doing it. I would make it wrong. So I would be the worst person. Technology is not always my friend.
Just an observation from myself last year. And I just want to say that it takes a lot of courage to move forward in life and leave some things behind, but also at the same time, bring it to the practice instead of holding it onto it. And so I think it's a mutual sharing with the groups that you have.
Yeah.
So I think that's what really keeps drawing me back to Central. Because it is about sharing their experiences, our experiences, other students, tying it up, not all nicely in a bow.
No, that's not possible.
No, it's not. But that's what really interests me about the work, and it's the exchanges. Again, with the practical, and that's what keeps drawing me back to Central, because that's what I've noticed. There's a lot of theory out there, and
then it's got to be tied to practice. Theory in isolation of practice is just empty words for me. The theory is important, but without it having relevance to the real world, there's no point in it.
Right, it's that connection that needs to take place. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to suggest we stop staring at each other. Not because it's not lovely to see you, but I don't want to make it awkward with you not having questions. Sophie, is there anything we need to say that I haven't done?
No, I think everything's been covered. And if you have any questions, just send us an email.
Yeah, absolutely. My email is there. Use it. If I don't reply for a couple of days, don't panic. I will get to it. My inbox is overflowing, but I will absolutely answer it. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out if that's useful to you.
And everyone will receive a recording of the session as well.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Thanks
Thank you for coming from all over the world to this little space.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.